Welcome back, film fans. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well, of course. God, it's a grey and miserable day here today. So winter's finally arrived, I think, unfortunately. At least in my opinion, I'm not a big fan of winter at all. So I thought, why not do a video, brighten up the day a little bit, hopefully for you guys as well. In light of, first let's preface this video a little bit, right? I want to say, never be ashamed. Never be ashamed, or let's say never be made to feel ashamed about the taste that you have, about what you like, right? I want to preface the video with this before I go into what the subject of this video is, which essentially is about precisely that, okay? Not shaming as such, but the movies that, despite your better judgment, you know, especially if you're like I say, you're a cinephile or a cineast, you love your movies, right? That despite your better judgment, there's just those movies where you kind of know that you shouldn't like them, right? And I don't just mean guilty pleasures here, okay? Although that indeed is part and parcel of this video. So I'm going to talk about several guilty pleasures that I do have, but also kind of, because some of these movies that I'm going to talk about, I do genuinely like. It's not a question of, oh, you know, it's kind of, oh, it's awful, it's so bad, it's good, and I shouldn't like it, but I do. Some of these I do like for genuine reasons, and I do genuinely think they're really good films. But it's the the kind of outliers in your cinematic taste. And a good kind of gauge of that is if you had someone round, especially someone who kind of knew you a bit, and they're the films on the shelf that just stick out like a sore thumb. They're going, oh, you own that? Oh, okay. You know, or when you kind of look, you kind of go, oh God, that just doesn't sit well with the collection. You know, it's just, but nonetheless, you're not going to remove it. You like it. Okay. So I do want to preface this by saying, you know, never be ashamed of what you like. Your taste is your taste. However, we all have those things that you go, God, why do I like that? And so this video is kind of me, I suppose, working through in my head, why do I like these? Why do I own these movies? So I've got several movies here that I want to share with you guys that, again, to me, that's kind of opposite of the franchises video that I did, which is where I kind of, the movies that I should quote unquote like, or the franchises that I should like being a film fan, that I just don't. Here it's in some cases it's the opposite of, why do I like this? But I do, quite clearly. So yeah, let's kick it off. Let's get into the video. So the first example is actually, it's not one of those really, because I genuinely think this isn't a guilty pleasure to me. But nonetheless, it sticks out like a sore thumb in my collection. And you know, if you watch the video that I made a couple of weeks ago, which probably, well, a lot of people didn't. It was a video that not many people watched at all, actually, was the video that I made in regards to my blind spots, right? My cinematic blind spots, the movies that in filmmakers and subgenres I just can't get on with. One of the things I named was animation. And some people actually kind of responded to that and actually named some good suggestions, even including like animation and filmmakers that I forgot, such as Satoshi Kon's anime, which I've always been, I wouldn't say a fan of, but I've always admired his films. I've liked and enjoyed his films when I've watched them. But there is one animation that I do own, or series that I do own of animations that I do love. Loved them since I was a kid, still love them now. And that is the Wallace and Gromit films. Yeah, I own the Cheese Tin box set. This is of their first three. So Grand Day Out from '89, Wrong Trousers, and Close Shave. Doesn't have a Matter of Loaf and Death, which I think came out in 2000, showing my age here, 10-ish. Which I still caught, by the way, when it originally aired on BBC, because that's what they did even still back then. Because the new one's out now, of course, on Netflix, which, yeah, like I say, being the age it's airing on Netflix. They're actually doing a 4K box set release this month, which has the first four but doesn't have the new one that's on Netflix, which, again, this is an annoyance of mine. When a film's kind of like made for or exclusive to Netflix, most of the time they don't get physical media releases, it seems, and I find that very frustrating. I don't like things being chained to a platform, but hey, platform capitalism, that's the era we're in, unfortunately. But I love these. Like I say, I love that. I wore out all the VHSs of these when I was a kid, and I still love them now. I think they're terrifically made. I think this is kind of like a British institution, right? It really is. Arbon Animation Studios, based out of Bristol. Nick Park's a kind of unsung genius, I think, of animation. Not many people talk about Nick Park much, but he's the kind of brainchild behind Wallace and Gromit, as well as other things. Creature Comforts, you might remember if you're British and you remember that airing on TV. That was always fun to watch. But essentially the story of like an old man and his dog, an old kind of like, kooky inventor and his dog Gromit. And stop motion animation, plasticine, just so charming, inventive, witty, funny, thrilling, brilliant. I mean, the films are thrilling. They really are, I think. Wrong Trousers, I think, has always been my favourite. And do you know what? There's still a scene in Wrong Trousers that even if I watched it now would give me a lump in my throat. And that's where Gromit leaves home because they take in a lodger that happens to be this criminal. It's the Penguin, right? Who's trying to steal this, do a diamond heist. And he uses their home as his base of operations. And Wallace kind of gets really attached to the Penguin and kind of Gromit feels frozen out, unloved and unappreciated. So as a result, he kind of leaves home in the rain and in the dark. And it's still a scene that gets me. There was actually a round table a few years ago in the lead up to the Academy Awards. There was a directors' round table. There was a host and a bunch of directors. There was Tarantino, Danny Boyle, Iñárritu. I'm trying to think of the other directors that were nominated that year. Ridley Scott, and there was a few others. And the host said, if you could send essentially one cinematic sequence into space for aliens to see, to say, this is cinema, what would it be? And Danny Boyle rather quickly said the train chase sequence from The Wrong Trousers is what he'd send. I was like, that's a brilliant choice because it's a fantastic sequence. I think it's actually a great, regardless of animation, take it outside of the context of animation, one of the great action sequences, I think. It's a fantastically edited and paced sequence. Of course, they did a feature film in 2005, Curse of the Were Rabbit, which I went to see in the cinema, which I'm a big fan. I didn't like it as much. And again, I think this goes back to what I was saying about animation in my cinematic my cinematic blind spots video, which, like I say, not many people watch. But I said there about animation. I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if it was because Curse of the Were Rabbit was feature length, or whether it's because I just didn't find its pace as kind of it didn't have a clippy pace. It just felt a bit baggier. But to me, I prefer the shorts because all of these are about under half hour long. So yeah, they're great, and it sits atop my case behind me there. So yeah, I'm a fan of Wallace and Gromit. Like I say, and this doesn't even fit with the rest of the films that I'm going to talk about. So again, it's a kind of outlier in that sense. So it's not a guilty pleasure; it's a pleasure. The next one is a bit of a guilty pleasure. I've talked about this film on my channel before because I reviewed it when the Blu-ray came out, and that's Double Impact. Probably my favourite Jean-Claude Van Damme film. For kind of two reasons. One is he has to play two different characters, so he actually has to act a little bit. Jean-Claude Van Damme, that is. So there's that. And the second thing is it's in Hong Kong, right? It's filmed in Hong Kong, majority of which is filmed in Hong Kong. So you get the kind of Hong Kong aesthetic and action sequences and that kind of almost like that production style, right? Which just really gives it a real different flavour and zest that I think other Van Damme movies are quite surprisingly quite flat when you watch them and crudely made. This has an element of craft to it. It's a serviceable action movie. The kind that you don't really get anymore, I think. And it has a certain amount of charm to it. It's stupid. It's good, stupid fun, right? And like I say, this alongside probably Universal Soldier are my two favourite Van Damme films. So when this came out on Blu-ray, I just had to get it. Again, childhood nostalgia. Watched it when I was too young to be watching it. But I think the opening sequence of the parents' massacre, because essentially it's the story of two twins separated at birth because their parents are killed off by essentially a corrupt businessman in Chinese triads that he enlists to help them kill them off so he can take over this Chinese harbour tunnel that would rightfully be theirs. They're the sons, the heirs to it. But these parents are massacred at the beginning. That sequence still gets me. I think it's quite shocking and brutal. And there's a load of fight scenes in this. I think the fight scenes at the end now I find the least interesting part of this film actually on the tanker container container ship. because it feels like they just ran out of money and they just had to like wrap up the film. That's what it feels like. It gives off that vibe. It feels like all the money's in the first half of the film. But like I say, it's a good, stupid action movie. You know, if you're a fan of Van Damme, you would have seen it. There's no point me saying check it out. You would have already seen it. But yeah, I like it. So, but again, sticks out a bit. And it's a guilty pleasure, I must admit. Bolo Young's in it as well. It's always good fun. Right, this next film is definitely a guilty pleasure because everything about my kind of rational brain says I shouldn't really dig this. But again, childhood nostalgia plays a big part here. And I just really, really dig it, even though it's downright stupid, which is Robin Hood and the Prince of Thieves. I've even got the Arrow limited edition here. I haven't watched this in years, though. I still haven't watched this. I really do need to, but it's got a great cast, though, hasn't it? You got Kevin Costner, of course, Christian Slater, Morgan Freeman, Alan Rickman, who is definitely the highlight of the film. Alan Rickman's great in this. Again, he's one of those actors who's, I think he judges the material well. He has an self-awareness of what he's in, and therefore can play to what the material demands. You know, he knows this is kind of stupid, campy fun, and he goes with it. To be fair, I think all the actors do a good job in this. Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, she's beautiful in this, I think, as Maid Marian. Yeah, and it's got a Michael Kamen score. That's another great element of this. Actually, I've got another film here that has a Michael Kamen score, so there's some overlaps here, actually. That's just accidental. And of course, it's the film that introduced me to Bryan Adams, right? You know, that song that just didn't go off the #1 charts for like 12 weeks. I think he even had to pull it himself off the UK #1 charts because it was just like, it just wouldn't leave. And I kind of have a soft spot for Bryan Adams. I think that's the result of this movie. It kind of pop rock done right, in my view. Yeah, again, it's full of historical inaccuracies and stupidities, but who cares? Even Sean Connery pops up in this. I think this is just really good fun. Yeah, again, not really, not even my kind of genre normally, but it just goes to show you what you're exposed to as a child really can shape your tastes, or even if it doesn't shape your tastes, you kind of, that's the outlier, and that's the thing that kind of you will still like, even if you don't like kind of, you know, kind of medieval period dramas or whatever. So, right, the next film. Oh God, this is a guilty pleasure. So, I'm a sucker for erotic thrillers. I love a good erotic thriller. Well, I say I love a good erotic thriller. I don't think there's that many good erotic thrillers that have been made. Nonetheless, I'm going to watch it if it's an erotic thriller. There are a few that are really good. I think Basic Instinct is the best of all erotic thrillers made, in my opinion. Certainly of the 90s skin flick phenomenon. And this film was made directly, kind of really as a response to or as a result of that film. But really has more in common with something like Body Heat, which came out a decade prior, which is kind of more of a kind of, you know, the neo-noir femme fatale model. And that's the Madonna film, Body of Evidence. Slated at the time, came out in 93, slated at the time, slaughtered by critics for multitude of reasons, mainly Madonna and her performance, but as well, just that it was not a good film. Directed by Yuli Adele, actually, who did Last Exit to Brooklyn, so it wasn't in the hands of a useless director, but this is kind of known as one of the stinkers of the genre, and a stinker in general. And, you know, my rational critic brain says it's a pretty bad movie, but I kind of like it. I especially like the... see, calling it erotic thriller is a bit of a misnomer, because it's not much of an erotic thriller. It's got the erotic parts, or at least it attempts to have the erotic parts. Some people find this film kind of notoriously very unsexy, because essentially the erotic scenes are between Madonna and Willem Dafoe, who plays her kind of defense attorney because she's on trial for murdering, well, essentially shagging to death her partner for $8 million of inheritance in the will. Did she do it deliberately? Did she not? Kind of type thing. And Willem Dafoe's the poor sucker who gets kind of assigned to be her lawyer, and of course he's out of his depth. It's that typical neo-noir territory. it's far less, even in terms of its sexual politics, far less complex and ambiguous than, say, Basic Instinct, which I think actually gets kind of maligned, as does Verhoeven, for just being a misogynist. But actually, I think there's a little bit more subtlety and irony and complexity that goes on with something like Basic Instinct, actually. But yeah, this movie is, like I say, it's not really an erotic thriller. It's an erotic courtroom drama. That's not to say that anything really happens in the parking lot. There's a scene, where something erotic happens, but the courtroom drama is the bit that I think really it's at odds with the film, lets it down. But this is good, sleazy, stupid fun, I think. And like I say, I caught this when I was a horny teenager back in the day, looking for those sex scenes, I suppose. And I don't know. I mean, I'd probably watch anything with Willem Dafoe in anyway. But apparently Madonna's acting coach quit mid-production because she claimed that, Madonna just thinks she knows everything. So she quit. And I suppose it kind of tells in her performance. Sharon Stone she ain't. Let's put it that way. So, but it's actually got a surprisingly really good cast. Young Julianne Moore's in this, who also gets her kit off in a scene with Willem Dafoe. Yeah, so, and there's obviously an infamous scene with candle wax. I won't say any more than that. But, yeah, I literally had to get this Blu-ray, and I watched it the other day. And, yeah, it's not as bad as everyone says. I mean, it's bad, but it's almost like so bad that it's good kind of type thing, I think, anyway. Right, next up. 2 80s action films, okay, both produced by Joel Silver, actually, so there's a commonality here, and one of them scored by Michael Kamen, which is what I referred to earlier. This film here was remade this year. You can probably guess now what it is, but it was remade this year, 2024, and I think the remake was, it's got to be the worst film that I've seen this year, out of any modern film or just film that I've watched this year. First time watch or rewatch. Awful. And it made me appreciate the original all the more, which I liked anyway, as a kind of guilty pleasure. But now I kind of think, actually, you know what? It's kind of a good movie when you compare it to the remake. And that's Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. Okay, got the DVD here because it's still not been out on Blu-ray or 4K, shamefully, in this country. But Patrick Swayze was an interesting actor, right? In the sense that he made a couple of movies that really appealed to kind of a female core audience, Ghost and Dirty Dancing. But then he also did Roadhouse and Point Break, which are kind of like guy movies, technically speaking, right? So he's an interesting movie star in that instance. But this has got a really good cast as well. Sam Elliott in support, Ben Gazzara hamming it up as the villain. You've got Terry Funk, the wrestler, as there's a musclehead in this. I say Michael Kamen does the score. Joel Silver produced it. You've got Jeff Healey, the blind blues guitarist, who kind of almost plays the guitar as almost like a slide on his lap. Really interesting technique if you're into guitar playing and stuff. But so you've got great music. It's just really good kind of that 80s action fun, right? And an example of this is something that the remake missed is in casting Jake Gyllenhaal, which is fine, but having him as a kind of MMA roided up meathead, right? And this is the thing, right? This is what I don't get. The great irony is we always kind of said about 80s action cinema. That was the claim about 80s action cinema it was the decade of like steroid-bound musclehead protagonists. When you look around this era, the likes of Mel Gibson as Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon, or Bruce Willis as John McClane in Die Hard, or Dalton here, played by Patrick Swayze, they're all kind of lean, convincing, just not normal physical presence. They're in shape, but they're kind of just lean guys. They're not roid heads. I think now is in a worse era, actually. And now we kind of have a polarizing era where you either have to be a kind of personally trained, injected full of steroids meathead kind of action hero, such as, say, The Rock or Jake Gyllenhaal in this, and the remake, for example, or you're an OAP action hero. Your Liam Neeson's, your Denzel Washington's, your Bob Odenkirk's, whoever, right? Very strange how the two polarities exist in this era. But in this era, it seems, I think this we have this kind of phase of almost like more relatable, quote unquote, action stars, whatever that means. But in terms of their physique, at least, they kind of were more everyman-esque, if you know what I mean. But This is, yeah, like I say, really, really good fun, really camp fun. You know, it has that kind of that great line with it, where the henchman here, as you can see on the front here, where he's fighting the henchman towards the end, where he kind of says, you know, I used to fuck guys like you in prison. Very strange line, but brilliant. It's great fun. But yeah, the remake, again, like I say, I like Jake Gyllenhaal as well normally, but the remake's absolutely atrocious. And it's directed by Doug Liman, who I was praising in my, not my last video, but the video before, praising for kind of launching the Bourne franchise. He did Edge of Tomorrow, which is a kind of really good late Tom Cruise film. I think it's a good, enjoyable Tom Cruise action film. But he was kind of, you know, a director for hire for that, because it was made for Amazon Studios, right? Roadhouse remake. And I watched it based upon how much I liked the original. But my God, it's awful. And I've met some people that prefer the remake, so I don't know what world they live in. It's certainly not the right one. The next Joel Silver produced action movie from the 80s, I just think is a really good action movie. I think it's actually one of the best of the 80s. Commando, starring Arnie, right? Now, for me, there's kind of like two camps of Arnie movies. There's the terrible movies that he did, and then there's the genuinely great movies that he almost happens to be in. He is a reason why they're great, but he is actually in some genuine cinematic classics, in my opinion. This kind of falls in between the two camps, because I think it's a so bad it's good movie. Like it's a pretty crap movie, really. However, there's an element of craft to it. It's got several things going for it. One is, of course, Arnie at his kind of charismatic best in this. Arnie's charisma really does need to be appreciated more, I think. He was built to be a movie star. He really was. And he's someone who always wins me over, really, no matter what he's in. But the second thing is it moves at a good clip, this film. It's genuinely an exciting, well-crafted action film. The stunts and the choreography are fantastic. The action scenes are fantastic. This is a kind of gun lover's dream. You know, it fetishizes guns, muscles. Speaking of fetishization, right, so the great thing about this film, I never even realised this because I grew up with this on VHS. And by the way, incidentally, this is the director's cut. So me growing up with it on VHS, I didn't even realise that it was edited down because of the violence. So when I finally saw the director's cut, I was like, oh my God, you know, the shed sequence, if those of you that know what I'm talking about, with the various power tools that are used to kill enemies quickly in that sequence. But I wasn't even aware of how camp the movie was. And then it took, I think I was watching it, I was showing it a friend for the first time, and he commented on how Bennett, played by, I think it's Vernon Wells, right, the Australian actor, who doesn't even attempt to hide his accent in the film, it's hilarious, who looks like a kind of, he looks like a kind of Freddie Mercury in chainmail, okay? It's so obvious when you think about it. He said, my God, he's camp. And I said, oh yeah, he is, isn't he? Wait, this whole movie is kind of camp. And then you start analysing the dialogue more. And actually, when you look at the story, really, it's kind of like a unrequited homoerotic love story and a revenge story in which Vernon Wells as Bennett just essentially wants to kill and annihilate, but also, weirdly, I suppose, fuck Arnold Schwarzenegger's character. That's the story, isn't it? You know, there is supposedly a kind of love interest in this story, played by, is it Ray Dawn Chong, who plays the love interest, right? But Arnie's character, John Matrix, one of the great, by the way, action names of the 80s, John Matrix, brilliant name. He could care less. Like he couldn't care less as to the love interest. There's no chemistry there whatsoever. It's all about him getting Bennett, right? And then they have the whole dialogue sequence at the end, which culminates, spoilers by the way, if you haven't seen this film, which if you haven't, what are you doing with your life? You need to watch this film. But the fight scene between them culminates in him essentially like impaling him with a pipe, and they have a knife fight before. I mean, the phallic imagery is insane, but like it's so camp, but it's amazing. But the thing is, this film has an which is quite surprising actually for mid-80s. It has an awareness of its own camp, right? There's an earlier fight scene between Matrix, Schwarzenegger's character, and Bill Duke, who plays Cook, in a motel room, and they're kind of exchanging this macho dialogue. You know, I eat green berets for breakfast, and now I'm very hungry. And it cuts to Chong's character, and she says, "I can't believe this, all this macho bullshit." The film knows what it's doing, but it's having a great time with it nonetheless. It's got some great one-liners. This is kind of like, aside from the actual cinematic classics that Arne's in, this is his best film, in my opinion. Aside from the kind of, the Terminators, the Predators, the Total Recalls. Everything else is kind of really below this, and kind of a disappointment in my view. One more film to talk about. And this is, okay, so going back to franchises, this is a franchise I love. And despite all my better, all my kind of rational brain and my better critical tastes and faculties tell me, I shouldn't love these films. But again, growing up with them, these are my comfort blanket movies, 100%. And I do intend to cover every single one of these and do a proper run through on the channel. And I've picked the one here. It happens to be the last one that I watched of the series. So it's my most recent watch. And I forgot how enjoyable it is. And it's probably one of the most divisive ones of the franchise. I think it's got to be the longest running film franchise, one of the most successful ones in history. You probably know what I'm talking about. James Bond. And the last one I watched was Moonraker. A lot of people don't like Moonraker. A lot of people don't like James Bond. But even people that love James Bond, this is one of the ones that usually is ranked near the bottom. Some people have it ranked near the top. And it's the last one I watched, because they always do reruns on TV, right? And this is the one it happened to be on. And I think it was like a Sunday afternoon. I went round to see my mum. This was on. My mum loves Bond as well. So we watched a Bond film, and it was this one. And I just forgot how fun it is. And sometimes, I think as I get older, I appreciate the stupid fun of the Bond films more. Like I say, everything tells me I shouldn't like this film, okay? Or the Bond franchise and kind of what it stands for. I suppose it's politics, right, and all that kind of stuff. And the fact it's just nonsense, okay? However, I do genuinely think the Bond films, particularly the ones from the 70s and the 80s actually, have a level of craft to them in terms of their action choreography, their stunt work, that is kind of unparalleled, actually. There's an element of craft to them, to the series. The credit sequences, the locations, just all these things, these elements, the sets, Ken Adams' sets, right? That are fantastic. They genuinely do have a level of charm and craft to them. That, like I said, despite my better judgment, I love them. And I could watch any one of these and be almost any one of them. There are some I don't like, and be entertained thoroughly by them. And Moonraker is probably the campest of the lot of them, but it's also one of the most fun, I think. It's the stupidest entry of the franchise, perhaps. James Bond going into space. Say more. But it's just, especially, maybe it's in contrast to the Craig era, which was, kind of, some people have kind of denounced, as being kind of overly serious and somber in tone, that people now are kind of having a bit of nostalgia for Pierce Brosnan's era and Roger Moore's era, all the more so. And I think there's an element of truth to that. You watch something like Moonraker and you go, I kind of miss these Bonds. I don't know what that says, but I do. So, yes, I own all the Bonds. Well, actually, I don't anymore. I own them all up to a point. I've got the kind of massive box set down there that they did way back 15 years ago. That has all the kind of ultimate editions in. It goes all the way up to the end of the Brosnan era, but so Dying of the Day being the last one. So I've got the first 20. I still don't own any of the Craig ones. And that's not out of like a dislike of Daniel Craig at all, or Craig's Bonds. It's just, I need to get them. It's just a separate add-on, isn't it? Interestingly, they're the only ones released in 4K as well, which now that Amazon technically owns the rights to the Bond franchise in a sense, I don't know where that leaves them with the physical media, which again, is quite worrying, but there we are. Which is why I refuse to get rid of my DVDs of Bonds. Plus, they've all got great extras on. But Moonraker it's stupid, hilarious, fun. And I appreciate Roger Moore's Bond more over time, I must say. I love them all for different reasons. Like I say, they are my comfort blanket movies. So, those are some of the movies in my collection. Some of the films, my kind of, like I say, that I just love. Despite my better judgment, I just love them. So what are yours? What do you think about my selections? As always, if you like the video, please do like and subscribe. Don't forget to comment as well, be part of the discussion. And as always, guys, I will see you on the next one. Take care.